It was impossible to know how many days I spent in the clinic. I slept, woke up confused, and let more blood be drawn if it was safe. Most times I only stayed awake long enough to drink some juice or eat something light. While I was out, my arm was covered in a cast. Every time I went back to sleep, someone came by to sign it. I could only tell time had passed by how cluttered the cast got. Most signatures were from creatures that had been healed by the blood donations. At least supernatural creatures healed fast when they had enough energy. The clinic slowly cleared out, leaving only the worst cases behind. When I was able to get up and walk, I found where Marsh was laid up. The empty space under his blanket almost caused me to break down. Aside from the missing leg, his mood looked to be pretty good. They might be able to make a fake leg almost as good as his old one, or at least something to let him walk again. He said that his leg was taken when he went out to try and save more people trapped in an office. The karaoke room had been perfect for hiding, and everyone who made it inside was fine. He even showed me a small crystal he'd taken in secret. No one knew what had saved them or why the crystals appeared. He knew taking one would probably get him in trouble, but he felt as if he owed the sudden appearance of them for his life. Every attacker left inside the building turned out to be killed by them, and each door had been smashed open by their sudden appearance. My hand felt my stomach where I was positive I'd been cut open. Not even a scar was left behind, and I had no answers of how it happened. We talked for a while until he got sleepy. I left him, promising to check in on him when I got the chance. As I walked away from his bed, Serval found me. The look on her face told me that she needed to say something important, and it was not very pleasant. "Are you doing all right?" she asked. I nodded. I felt still a bit lightheaded, and mostly in shock from everything. Nothing had really sunk in yet. "Can you tell me the names of everyone we lost? No one really wants to break the news to me yet," I asked her. She bit her lip, not sure if I could handle it just yet. Nodding, she let me sit down before saying all the names. Overall, 25 people in the office died. Not as many as I feared. I didn't know most of the names, and yet I burned them into my mind, swearing to never forget them. I rubbed my eyes while hearing Gina's name, thinking back to her last message to everyone. Only 2 numbered agents were lost, and they were the 2 that hurt the most. 706 and 526 both arrived at the daycare just after the worker died. They fought off the attackers, then 706 left towards Anker's office trying to get help as his brother stayed behind. If they hadn't shown up when they did, 3 more names would have been added to the list. We sat in silence, going over that day in our minds. Serval didn't tell me anything she had gone through, but she'd worked in the office. These people were her co-workers. This never should have happened. I hadn't really asked if anyone found any leads as to who was behind the attack, being too focused on trying to find out who survived. Since waking up, I had sent messages to Nick without getting a response. He must be busy trying to help with the cleanup. I kept telling myself not to get worked up. "Come on, you need to see this." My heart started to pound. Standing up, I followed her deeper into the clinic. After going through some twisting hallways, we stopped in front of a locked door covered in spellwork to keep others out. She quickly got to work going through the processes to open the door. Her hand hovered over the handle, not yet touching it. "This is going to be hard on you, you know. I swear it looks much worse than it is." Without a clue of what she was talking about, I braced myself. My vision wavered when I saw who slept in the small room. My body froze, unable to move until she gently gave my back a push. The room only held a bed with a small night table next to it. In that bed was my partner, blanket up to his shoulders, his hair so long it touched the blankets as he slept. I quickly went to his side, gasping at his face. Cracks ran along his left side, cutting through his closed eye. The deepest ones revealed a glittering red stone inside, instead of flesh and bone. I found his hand under the blanket to hold it, only to see that someone wrapped it up, covering more cracks. "What happened?" I choked out. Serval pulled up a chair to sit down and made me sit before she started to speak. I still held Nick's hand, though I feared it might break from the pressure. "He saved all of us. He was outside the building with a bunch of other agents. When he saw you about to be killed, well, he cracked, you know. Those crystals came from him. They killed all of those attackers and broke down the doors. Everyone is freaked out that he was able to break through the building. It shouldn't be possible." She trailed off, hands in her lap, fingers twisted in an odd grip. "Because of that Silver King thing, right? He's a big deal, but who cares if Nick was able to break down the windows?" I was beyond caring about how he did it, only wanted to know if he would be all right. "Skylar, being able to overturn the Silver King in any way is like flipping everything we know on its head. People are going to come after him if we let this get out. So far, everyone has sworn a vow of silence about what they saw, and agreed to have their memories erased if needed. A lot of agents had friends inside the building, so they want to protect the one who saved them. That was sort of good news. Looking over my partner, it still didn't do anything for my worries. "Is he going to recover?" I finally asked. "I think so. 10 years ago, he cracked very badly after his partner died. I wasn't working back then, I just saw pictures. His whole body was terrible. I didn't know how he was still alive after that. I think he was asleep for 3 years and completely unresponsive for 4. The last few years, he slowly recovered to the point he could work in the field again. In fact, he'd only been working for a few months before you two met. To him, his partner's death just happened instead of it being 10 years ago. I think, if he recovered from that, he'll be fine now. You know, at least this time around he has someone to wake up for. Everything I held back came flooding up then. It felt like all just too much. I started to ugly cry in front of Serval, trying to wipe the tears away as they came. She rubbed my back in a very motherly way. I felt glad she was the one who adopted Luna. My chest hurts, I complained. It honestly felt like a heart attack. The grief of losing 2 friends and my partner not waking up tore open my chest. She assured me I wasn't dying, just upset, and it would pass at some point. I didn't believe this pain would ever go away. Have you ever heard why the Silver King is so important? She started. I didn't know why she brought that up, but I was still sniffling too much to speak. Right now, who he is isn't the original king. The first one died a very long time ago. His true body is hidden away somewhere as punishment for what he did. His first and only mistake. Back then, creatures were much different. Mindless and cruel. They only hunted and ate. He watched over them, ensuring the balance of the worlds was kept. Then, our king met a human. No one really knows what kind of person the human was, but they won over his heart. He experienced love for the first time, and shared it with all the creatures under his rule, forever changing them. Since then, his power over us is love. No matter what else we feel for him, we'll always bow to his words because we love our king more than anything else. She paused, staring down at the floor as I tried to follow why she was saying all of this. Giving me a smile, she went on. Love hurts, you know. He wasn't aware of that until the human died. The creatures of that day turned on him because of the pain of losing the ones they loved. They cursed him for causing them to feel such things. He was killed, turned into a shadow of his true self. Hints of his real self were hidden away in a human body that needs to be switched out continuously, keeping the balance but overall being used as a tool for the creatures he rules over. When I first heard all of this, I didn't understand it at all. It was only after adopting Luna that I fully understand how much love can hurt you. If anything happened to that child, I don't know what I would do. But I find myself thinking it wasn't a mistake. Those creatures were wrong to turn on him for introducing love to them. Because, no matter what, I treasure the time I spend with my child. I'll never trade that for anything. The pain I might have in the future is worth being able to have met Luna in the first place, you know. When the tears came a second time, I was thankful they came while I was with someone who wouldn't judge them. Serval let me stay with Nick for as long as I wanted, leaving me to think over what she said. I fell asleep in that room, holding my partner's hand, wishing he would wake up. Days passed, and Nick showed no signs of stirring. I couldn't stay in the clinic for much longer. When I went back to my apartment, it felt far too quiet after being in a busy clinic for so long. I tried to keep busy with work, Jimmy and Tippy being as supportive as they could be. 2 weeks after the dust settled, an invitation came for a memorial for the fallen office workers. I debated on going, still feeling guilty over not being able to save more people. If Serval didn't show up a few hours beforehand to bring me with her, I might not have gone. My black dress shirt and pants appeared too on the nose for such an event. As she helped me get ready, she explained how the memorials worked. Every 6 months they held one for the fallen agents during certain holidays creatures knew about. That day before sunset they were holding a special one for the ones lost in the office. With her as a guide, we arrived in a large field near a calm lake that stretched out pretty far. A large crowd already gathered there, but almost no one spoke. She showed me to a place to get small candles, almost the size of ones for birthday cakes. She took a few, one for each person she knew that passed. I took 3 and considered taking more. 3 to start with, then I would honor the rest of the office. There was a line of people holding a silver flame for the candles. Each person were either family of the ones lost, or their partners. If the person who passed away had neither, Ankar filled in for that spot, being the supervisor of the entire office. There was at least one person without someone close to mourn them, because he was at the end of the line, although there was a crowd of people going over to him to have their candle lit. Once the candles were lit, they would be taken to the edge of the river and placed into a paper lantern. A large amount had floated up into the sky already, and then caught on fire at some point, disappearing without a leaving trace. My first trip was to Gina's family. I'd only known her for a few minutes, and yet her death hurt deeply. I couldn't say much to the one lighting the candles for her, a woman who looked a lot like her, but I knew she could tell how I felt and was thankful that so many people cared. I walked over to the lake, setting off a lantern in her honor. I watched it float upwards and glow softly while reflecting on how much I wanted to see her again, even if it was just long enough to tell her thank you for what she did that day. I dreaded lighting the other 2 candles on my own. as Serval had gone to pay her own respects. I waited in line, seeing the white hair of the one with the flame for 526 and 706. We'd only met once. Seeing him again under such circumstances felt almost unbearable. I stopped in front of him, and Thule gave me a small smile. His nails were painted to match his late brother's. Since his old codename had been 202, I assumed he was the oldest. They all said their older brother painted their nails, making me guess he had been the one doing it. "I'm sorry," I choked out as he carefully lit the candles in my hand from a larger one in his. "From what I heard, you were with 526 in the end. Us numbered agents are expendable. My parent thinks it is natural for us to be sold and die for a cause. We almost never have someone to hold our hand when we pass. The fact you were able to do so with one of my younger brothers when I couldn't be there for him makes me glad. So, thank you." I needed to bite the inside of my mouth to keep from crying. Tears still escaped from my eyes and dropped down, threatening the flames. I shouldn't be thanked. If I was just a little bit stronger or faster, then maybe. I'm also glad you care this much about them, and just how many candles I've lit today. I always assumed no one really noticed when a numbered agent passed away. The grief is going to become manageable. Don't be angry at yourself for feeling it. But I can only light a candle once for you, so don't let your tears put that fire out. Not breaking down right then was the hardest thing I've ever gone through until that point. I wasn't in any kind of state to speak more with him. Taking the candles, which suddenly looked far too small, I brought them to the side of the lake for the lanterns. I left last that night. I sat watching each light float up into the darkening sky, flickering out one by one. For a little over a month, I kept going to see Nick every day. He didn't move once as I sat and spoke with him about everything that happened. The cold settled in, and snow threatened to fall at any point. The corporation still hadn't met with the hunters about the attack. They probably wanted to wait for Nick to wake up. The old office building had been condemned, and a new one set up. Things slowly started to return to normal, but none of the workers truly felt comfortable in the new setting. At some point, Nick was moved to a room in the new office instead of the clinic. I spent a lot of my time on the floor of my apartment, feeling too miserable to do much. I worked a little in my office, not really able to put that much effort into my tasks. Not even calling my niece and nephew could improve my mood. A request came in for someone to work with an agent on a simple stakeout case. Thinking it might be good that I spent some time outside with another person, Serval signed my name up for it. The agent I got sent to work with had a reputation to be able to cheer up anyone. When we met for the first time, it was clear how he got such a reputation. After all, almost everyone loved dogs. Bali stood over 6 feet tall, thin but toned. He wore a suit with a winter jacket over top. His friendly smile almost made me crack one myself for the first time in a month. His head looked like a reddish-brown husky. A long tail came out from under his coat and his hands were covered in fur. But he wore normal shoes, making me wonder what his feet looked like. His legs were also pretty skinny compared to the rest of his body. At first, I thought he was a werewolf, but he shook his head at the idea. Werewolves were much bigger than himself. His species possibly distantly related to them. The case turned out to be good for me, as hard as it was to admit. Bali was easy to talk with and could coax anyone into spilling their worries to him. His personality a welcome one, especially because of how everyone walked on eggshells around each other after the attack on the office. When Nick woke up, I wanted these two to meet. I knew they would become fast friends. While we waited on our short stakeout, he told me that he'd been a police officer. His human form got taken from him for some reason he didn't want to mention. His partner rejected what he really looked like after that. Since Bali grew up mostly as a human, returning to the supernatural world and rules had been an adjustment. Speaking with a human who was fine with his appearance cheered him up a lot. After our quick and easy case, we swore to work with each other again in the future. I lost track of how long I waited for Nick to wake up. When the snow started to come down, I got called into the office. Matthew wanted to speak with me. Serval came over to show me down the hallway of the new office building. Everything looked so white and new it put everyone on edge. Matthew's work area looked fairly clean. It didn't suit the space. He went over how well the orchestra had recovered. It appeared ready to go on a job at any time. I sat with the sword in my lap, liking how heavy it felt. When the sword was over with all the attention, I put it back in the shelf to rest some more. Thinking that would be all, I turned to leave. Matthew called out to me and placed a wooden box on a desk. Puzzled, I walked over to see what else he wanted. These aren't really ready for jobs yet, but they're for you. Their brother gave permission for you to be the one to take them, he said as he opened the box. My breath caught as I saw 2 short swords in black wooden scabbards sitting inside the box. My hand shook as I reached out, wanting to touch them. Wrapped around the plain hilt something that caused tears to come to my eyes. Both had thin woven bracelets with them. Carefully taking the pair in my arms, I held them close trying to sense what they were feeling. Both were weak blades, but much more friendly than any of the others I'd come across. Neither recognized me, but both seemed happy for the attention. I instantly knew who they'd been in life. 526 and 706. I asked to confirm it. Matthew nodded and watched as I sunk down, holding them tighter. We haven't named them yet. You can figure out what you think they should be called after you use them for a bit. And they're pretty weak. It might be as long as a year before they'll be ready to fight. That was fine. They never needed to fight again if they didn't want to. After everything I wanted to say to them, my mind went blank, unable to think. I was holding the pair who I wanted to apologize to for a while, and yet I couldn't. I could only tell them how glad I felt to see them. Both swords rattled a little from how giddy those words made them. Soon, they got tired because they were such new weapons. I could tell they needed a lot more rest. Treating them like glass, I set them back into the box to be put away. Just as the box closed, Serval came rushing in the room. "Skylar, come on. Your partner is awake," she said, breathless from racing over. We both ran along the hallway, much like those dramatic medical emergency shows my sister watched when we were younger. Serval's lab coat flapping wildly behind her. She finally stopped in front of the room and grabbed the door handle to keep it closed. I wanted to go inside and see Nikki, but she needed to go over something first. I haven't spoken to him yet, just saw he was awake. His memory got messed up the last time he cracked. Okay, so be ready for that in case it happens again. All right. Letting go of the handle, she stepped back. My mind raced at the thought. Nick didn't remember anything about his old partner the first time he went through something like this. Would he still know who I was? How much different would he be after waking up? Would I still have the same partner? Bracing myself, I slowly opened the door to peek inside. The room looked to be a bit bigger than at the clinic. A TV set on one wall in case he woke up and got bored. His bed large and the side table cluttered with flowers and get-well gifts. Nick sat up in bed, his head turned towards the window, staring at the snow falling. The cracks on his face were almost healed. The long one still ran through his eye and his hand still had bandages on it. I walked over, unaware I was holding my breath. He didn't look over until I cleared my throat. His head turned, his now longer hair shifting with it. The left eye looked dull from the crack running through it. I had approached him from his bad side, so he didn't see me for a second. When he knew who came into his room, his face turned into such an easy smile that I sank into the chair next to his bed, my legs no longer able to support my weight. His smiles always were on the smaller side. This one was the largest and most gentle I'd ever seen from him. "Have I been asleep for a long time?" he asked, his voice hoarse. His answer simply a very tight and long hug. It was a miracle I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that before he woke up. I finally sat down to talk to him about what happened. He first asked about the names of the ones who were killed in the attack. Each name had never left my mind after hearing them. I carefully answered his questions, trying to slip in ones of my own to test his memory. This time around, the cracking didn't mess with his head. At least, it didn't seem like it. His answers were fine, but how he spoke sounded a little off. I noticed he smiled far too much in our conversation, as if it became easy for him. He smiled at things I brought up from our past to see if he knew what I was talking about. It almost felt like a different version of him, one with a bit more emotion than before. Or maybe like the person he acted like when he truly felt comfortable opening up. I didn't want to tire him out, but we took our time speaking. His eyes landed on his phone, which sat on the side table. Those smiles dropped as he looked at it with his good eye. His reaction made me realize something I never would have noticed before. After seeing the pink flip phone with the charms, his partner's old phone, his tone shifted back into how we first met, even and almost emotionless. A wall built up again from sheer guilt. For a short while, he'd forgotten what he'd done and revealed what he really would be like if that tragedy hadn't happened. "Can I ask a favor from you?" he asked after a while. "Would you be able to stay at my place while I'm stuck here? I imagine I won't be released back home until my eye heals, and I do not know who has been feeding my pets. Abarash might have been in charge of taking care of the dogs, but she's fairly busy. I still haven't forgiven her for forgetting about my fish the first time I cracked. She also may have not fed the tarantulas since I've been asleep." I shuddered thinking about those damn spiders. At least Gregory had found a new home. I'd hoped the rest of them found a new one, but it was not to be. Yet for Nikki, I could brave feeding 2 spiders. If they were still alive, that is, I can feed them. But do I need to stay at her place? Can't I just get a ride over or something? I asked. Overall, I really didn't mind it, but I thought no one should be allowed to be at the mansion unless he was there besides Abarash. And Mage. I hadn't heard from him in a while. How had he not been crashing through the office trying to find Nick yet? The dogs may be lonely. And Mage. He trailed off thinking about what kind of damage the creature could have done while he wasn't home. I agreed to house sit, unaware that his spider collection had grown. I might not have stepped foot in that place if I knew. I did refuse to leave his room for a few hours that day. Only when he started to nod off again that I got up to make arrangements to get to his place. Abarash set up a door that connected the mansion to the office and my apartment. I packed up a few things, ready to stay for a while. The pack of undead-looking dogs were happy to finally have someone to play with. It snowed on the grounds, but they weren't bothered by it. The puppies were already half the height of their mother. Some instructions had been left about what they ate, when, and about the other pets Nick needed to have someone look after. I cursed him when I saw the room with the tanks of big-ass spiders. Still, I liked Nick quite a bit more than I hated spiders, and thankfully, they didn't need much care. Aside from them and the dogs, no other creature needed attention. He had long since found a home for Charles, the human-faced cat he owned for a short while. On Christmas, I begged them to let Nick come home for half a day. After a lot of tests and constant heckling, Abarash agreed. He needed some help moving around, but I made the day as nice as I could for him. He watched me play with the dogs in the snow, and I attempted to cook a nice dinner only to burn almost everything. Nick needed to take over, guiding me along on what to cut, how much and how long to cook everything for. Christmas dinner was saved, but he wore himself out so much that he fell asleep on the couch in the other room. When I stayed at his place, I attempted to clean it up a bit. A lot of junk cluttered the hallways, so I sorted it and took photos. Nick gave me directions on what should be donated and to where. I started to go through each room, seeing that they needed to be dusted and cleaned, but only managed to finish 2 floors of the large place by Christmas. On the second floor, I found a locked door, and it bothered me a lot. I also found Mage passed out in such a deep sleep on one of the beds I couldn't wake him. He must have gone into hibernation mode when the weather got colder. After getting dinner cleaned up, I went to check in on Nick. He'd woken up and I started to get the fire going. Lately, his hands felt too cold. This holiday had been so busy with seeing my family and trying to shop for such a great influx of friends I nearly didn't have time to get Nick anything. But he greatly enjoyed all the gift cards to pet shops. He did have a lot of his own money, but having the cards in his wallet reminded him to go to the stores after he got well enough to do so. He also liked the plush Santa hat I forced on him that day. Being bedridden, Nick got very bored. He picked up knitting, even though his cracked hand made it a little slow. But he did have a lot of time on his hands, so he handed over a poorly wrapped blue sweater. I don't know what kind of yarn it was made from, but it felt like the softest and warmest sweater I've ever worn. We stayed by the fire, knowing he would be collected soon to go back to the office to have someone keep an eye on his condition. The entire day made him happier than he'd been in a month. There is a locked door on the second floor. I brought up, nestled in my sweater. Is there anything dangerous left behind I should know about? And is there more stuff on other floors? Cause I've barely gotten through the 2. Nothing dangerous is in there. You can force open the lock or try any keys you find. I think that was Mickey's old room. It's been so long, I think it's alright to get her room sorted, Nick said while looking out the window, unaware of the bomb he just dropped. He had said his partner's old name, one that'd been scrubbed from all the records in case he heard it and got upset. And he just came out and said it. Those memories of his should be long gone. Mickey, I asked slowly to see his reaction. He looked over, huddled under blankets I had piled on him, unaware of what caused my stressed expression. It finally dawned on him, but he didn't really look too upset. Oh, I guess cracking a second time rattled something loose. I know her name, but I can't seem to really remember anything else. He trailed off, trying to think about his dead previous partner. Because of how tired he appeared, I didn't press it. We could talk all about it later. When Abarash came to pick him up, I didn't even mention it to her. I wanted to think on it for a bit before saying anything. Nick was getting better. His shattered memories from before were slowly coming back. In the back of my mind, I feared what kind of person he might be if they all returned to him. I knew I would still care about him and he would always be my partner, but would these memories hurt him? Was it better for them to never return? That wasn't the only thing bothering me. Mickey and Nick had lived together. That thought kept me up at night. He'd never been interested in a relationship with anyone, but he loved her, so much so he nearly died after being forced to kill her. They lived together and he loved her. I wanted to piece it all together, but at the same time it didn't feel like it was my place to do so. He could have cared about her in the same way he cared about me, just as an adopted family member and nothing other than that. I chose to spend the new year alone, catching up on work. The previous spring, I'd been alone, working away at a boring, almost dead-end job, trying to support myself and my sister, not comfortable with any aspect of my life. Now, my office was full with jobs coming in too fast to handle all of them. The side jobs from the corporation had taken part of my ear and given me a few wicked scars. My phone had filled up with new friends and contacts, my sister off somewhere recovering, and I'd gotten much closer with her kids. I gained almost as much as I'd lost that year. I took a few minutes after midnight to look at myself in the mirror. This year, maybe in a few more months, I would take the final step and plan a day for the surgery. My body was still a bit slim, but I liked how I looked for the first time in my life. Without knowing it, I had held back for so long, not believing I'd earned my surgery. Even if someone had told me that I didn't need to earn it, I wouldn't be able to listen to them. After I made sure Nick got better, I could take care of myself. I loved him, making it possible to accept someone like him could care about someone like myself. I wasn't overly strong. I couldn't do magic, I tended to fall for any girl that crossed my path and had a bunch of other faults. None of that mattered because I had found a brother I cared about. Just a little bit longer, and he would be doing much better. I would stay by his side no matter what came to light if his memories returned. He started becoming a bit of a different person compared to how he was when we first met. That was all right, because so was I.